Greetings from Brother Stephen. I'm a disciple and witness of Jesus Christ. To all the inhabitants of the earth, I present to you as a witness this gospel of the kingdom. In this lesson today titled Cain and Abel, we're going to be going over Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 7. We're going to read these verses in the King James Version, Oxford edition of 1769 first. And it reads, And Adam knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering, but unto Cain and to his offering he had no respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth, and why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shall thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lie at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. So before we get into my translation of this subsection of scriptures, I want to have a review first, just to bring everybody up to date and make sure we're all on the same page. I want to start this review off with Genesis chapter 3, verses 14 and 15, when it says, And Jehovah Elohim said unto Nakash. Nakash is Hebrew for the serpent. It's Hebrew for the serpent, and it's Hebrew for the constellation serpent. It says, Because you have done this, you are cursed. And then when you get to verse 15, it says, I will put racism between your progeny and her progeny. Now, the King James Version translation used the word seed, and I would explain why I updated my translation in this particular lesson to progeny here in a second. The other thing is, anytime you see a tab next to any particular verses, that means I go over these particular verses in this study. So if you want more details, you just have to go back to that study. So again, if you go to Google Dictionary, and I just looked up the word progeny, it says a descendant or the descendants of a person. And then as you can see, some of the synonyms is offspring, children, young, family, etc. So when it says, and I will put racism between your progeny, it is talking about racism between his descendant and also his descendants. And again, that is between the progeny of the serpent and her, which is her is really referring to the nation of Israel. So now from here, I want to go to Genesis again, chapter 3, verses 14 and 15. It says, Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your birth pains and your pregnancy. In pain you shall birth children. And then when you go to Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 7, scriptures that we're going over in this lesson today, it says, And Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel. In other words, these are twins. And it lines up with astrology. So now when we go back to Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, and it says, I will put racism between your progeny and her progeny. Basically, what God did was fulfill this prophecy that he told to the serpent and to the woman with the pregnancy of Eve. Eve, very next pregnancy after the fall, he fulfills the prophecy he made to Satan when he says, and I will put racism between your progeny and her progeny. And he also fulfills the prophecy that he made unto the woman when he said, and unto the woman he said, I will multiply your birth pains and your pregnancy, and in pain ye shall birth children. So instead of typically having one children, now her birth pains are multiplied by having twins. And out of those twins, one is the progeny of Satan, and the other one is the progeny of God, the seed of God. So again, you have twins. One is a child of the devil, and one is a child of God. And also, between the two, Cain and Abel, we have racism in between those children. So now when you get to Genesis chapter 2, verses 9, it says, And Jehovah Elohim commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden ye may freely eat, but of the tree of technology of good and evil ye shall not eat. Now the reason I use the word technology instead of instead of knowledge is because this is talking about a specific knowledge, and that specific knowledge is scientific knowledge. And when you look up the definition of technology, it means scientific knowledge. And we go with this particular verse and translation in the study titled Tree of Knowledge when we cover Genesis chapter 2 verses 15 through 17. So now from here we're going to Genesis chapter 3 verses 7. This is after Adam and Chava ate of that tree of technology or that tree of knowledge. It says, and the eyes. And their eyes is referring to their imagination and their consciousness. It says, of them both were opened. And they understood that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and invented themselves skirts. Adam and Eve, when they was originally created, they had memory, but as far as imagination and consciousness, they did not possess it. And they did not have any, Adam and Eve did not invent anything until the fall. Before the fall, there was nothing man-made. And of course, in order to invent something, you need to imagine it first. You have to imagine it before you invent it. And also, your consciousness is just connected to your imagination, because when you're imagining things, of course, you have to decide in your head whether it will work or whether it won't work, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it affect people in a good way or whether it will harm people. So that imagination and that consciousness is just connected. Now I have the definition here of imagination and consciousness. And imagination is defined as the faculty or action of forming new ideas or images or concepts of external objects not present to the senses. And again, these are, you go through this process all in your brain. And when you just look up some of the synonyms, as you can see, it says imaginative faculty, creative power, fantasy, and informal mind's eye. So when you go back to Genesis chapter 3 verses 7, when it says, and their eyes, this is talking about that mind's eye, that imagination and consciousness was unlocked. And then I have the definition of consciousness here again. It's an inner feeling of voice viewed as acting as a guide to rightness and wrongness of one's behavior. So when you imagine things, your consciousness will let you know if that imagination is good or bad. So from here, I want to go to Genesis chapter 3 verses 22, and it reads, and Jehovah Elohim said, behold, they, Adam, and the one from him, comprehend right and wrong. So now I'm going to jump back to Genesis chapter 3 verses 14 to 15. When the scriptures read, I will put racism between your progeny and her progeny. The racism that exists between the progeny of Satan and the progeny of her is that racism is not color, skin color related. It has to do with right and wrong. So as we go through these next couple of verses, As you can see, I have green associated with right and the seed of God, and red is going to be associated with wrong, which is the seed of the devil. So again, now when you're talking about Cain and Abel, that racism that exists between them, it is not skin color related. It is because their imagination and consciousness. One is going to imagine good things, the other one is going to imagine bad things. One is going to have a good conscience, one is going to have a evil conscience. And that is racism. Racism is not skin related. Racism is mentally related. Evil people hate good people. And what we're going to do is we're going to confirm this with scripture. When you go to Proverbs chapter 29 verses 27, it says, an unjust man is an abomination to the just. So again, when you say unjust, an unjust man is a progeny of Satan. He comprehend or choose to do wrong. And again, an unjust man is an abomination to the just. So again, the just represents the progeny of God and those that do right. And he that is upright, just, is the progeny of God. They do right. In the way is an abomination to the wicked. So again, that wicked, unjust, progeny of Satan, they choose to do wrong. But again, when you pay attention to this verse, that racism that exists between them is that imagination and their consciousness. An unjust man is an abomination to the just, and he that is upright in his way is an abomination to the wicked. They do not get along mentally. Their mind's eye, their choices, their conscience, and imagination is completely different. When you go to Psalms chapter 119, verse 115, it says, depart from me, you evildoers. And again, evildoers, he's talking about the wicked, the unjust, the progeny of Satan. They choose to do wrong. He says, for I will keep the commandments of Elohim. So in other words, the difference between the progeny of Satan and the progeny of God is the progeny of God keeps the commandment of Elohim. They keep the commandments of God. And the progeny of the wicked, again, evildoers, they do not keep the commandments of Elohim. And again, that is that racism between Cain and Abel. Now I have this highlighted blue, and we're going to do the same thing as we go through these next couple of scriptures. It is just to understand that it relates to anything that's blue and bold. It relates to keeping the commandments of Elohim. So from here, I want to jump to 1 John chapter 3, verses 9 through 12. And again, we're referring to good and evil, those that keep the commandments of Elohim and those that do not. When you get to 1 John chapter 3, verses 12, it says, whosoever is born of God. This is that progeny of God. It says, do not commit sin. In other words, they do not violate the commandments of Elohim. So we have this yellow represents sin. It represents not keeping the commandments of Elohim. This blue represents keeping the commandment of Elohim. When you go to 1 John chapter 3, verse 4, it confirms this. It says, whosoever commit transgression. And this transgression is, let me do this for you. It's sin. So sin is transgression. It says, again, whosoever committed sin, transgress also the law. The law is keeping the commandments of Elohim. For sin is the transgression of the law. And again, this is the difference between the seed of Satan and the seed of God. So How do you recognize the seed of Satan from the seed of God? The seed of Satan choose to do evil. They have an evil imagination and an evil consciousness. The seed of God have good imaginations. They invent good things, and they have a good conscience. So when you go to 1 John chapter 3 verses 9 to 12, when you try to figure out whosoever is born of God, it says they do not commit sin. They do not transgress the commandments of Elohim under no circumstances. Because it say for sin is a transgression of the law. Sin is a transgression of the commandments of Elohim. So if you're violating the commandments of Elohim, you are not a child of God. Then it says for his seed. So whosoever is born of God, do not commit sin, for his seed. That seed is referring to the progeny of God. That good conscience, that good imagination remains in him. So now again, when it says for his seed, the reason it's green, because when you scroll back up, his seed, the upright, the just, the progeny of God. They comprehend right. They choose to do what is right and not wrong. And it says, and he cannot sin. The children of God cannot sin. Just like a sinner cannot do right all the time, the seed of God cannot sin. They cannot violate the commandments of God because that seed is in them. They have a good imagination and a good consciousness. It says because he is born of God. In this, the children of God are manifest. They are revealed. They are plainly seen. And the children of Diablos. So again, children of God will kind of be green here. And then manifest the children of Diablos. So in other words, you know the children of Diablos because they going to commit sin. They're going to transgress the commandments of Elohim. And it says, whosoever do not righteousness. And I have this bold so you can understand whosoever do not right. They are wicked, they're sinners. Doing not right is violating the transgressions of Elohim. They say is not of God. You are not of God if you do not keep his commandments. So now we at 1 John chapter 5 verse 18. It says, we know that whosoever is born of God, once again, sin not. Whosoever is born of God, the progeny of God, that seed of God, the descendants of God, do not sin. But he is begotten. Begotten means the same thing. Born of God, keep himself. So we're going to go over a few scriptures here so you can understand what it means to keep himself. When you go to James 1:27, it says, pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this. So the Bible tells you what pure religion is. It says to visit the fatherless. That's children who don't have fathers. And widows. Those are women whose husbands has passed away in their afflictions, when they're suffering and when they need help. And again, pure religion and undefiled before God is helping the needy, the children and the women, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. So you go back to 1 John chapter 5 verse 18, when we're talking about, we know that whosoever is born of God sin not, but he that is born of God keep himself. That keep himself mean he keep himself unspotted from the world. When you go to 1 Timothy 6:14, it says that you keep his commandment. And again, the commandment, when you go back up, is the law. The law, again, keep the commandments, are the commandments of Elohim. So again, that you keep his commandment. This is what it means to keep himself unspotted from the world. You keep the commandments of Elohim without spot, unrebukable. You don't break any commandments of God unto the appearing of our Lord Jesus Christ. 2 Peter 3:14 says, wherefore, beloved, seeing that you look for such things, be diligent, that ye may be found of him in peace, without spot. That without spot means you keep the commandments without spot, unrebukable, unto the appearing of our Lord Christ, and blameless. That means perfect. You do not commit sin. You don't make excuses for committing sin. 1 John chapter 5:18 says, we know that whosoever is born of God sin not. But he that is born of God keep himself, and the wicked one touch him not. So from here we're going to 1 John chapter 3 verses 9 to 12 again, where it says, whosoever is born of God do not commit sin, for his seed, that good imagination, that good consciousness, remains in him, and he cannot sin because he is born of God. In this the children of God are manifest, and the children of Diablos. Again, the children of Diablos, that's that progeny of bad, the seed of evil, evil imagination, evil consciousness. Whosoever do not right is not of God. Then it says, neither he that love not his brother. So in other words, we have that love is the seed, that whosoever is born of God commit not sin, for his seed. That's that seed of God. So the love, seed of God, children of God, the upright, the just, the progeny of God. They choose to do right and not wrong. So again, now from here I'm going to jump to 1 John chapter 4 verse 20 for another verse that it helps explain in more detail. When it says, neither is he that loveth not his brother, is because that mind's eye, that imagination and consciousness of good versus evil, the ultimate distinction of good and evil is love and hate. And again, that is that racism that exists between the children of the devil and the children of God. That imagination, good versus evil, love versus hate. It's all about the imagination and consciousness. When you go to 1 John 4:20, it says, if a man say, I love God, and hate his brother, he is a liar. If a man hate his brother, he is a liar. He do not love God. It says, for he that love not his brother. Now this word brother is not just talking about your sibling. This is talking about your fellow man. Cain and Abel were still brothers. Although they were separated, two manner of nations going to come from them, they're still brothers. It says, whom he hath seen. How can he love God whom he have not seen? And this commandment have we from him, that he who love God love his brother. They love their fellow man also, because we're all brothers and sisters. Some of us have good imaginations and good consciousness, and the other ones have evil imaginations and evil consciousness, but we are all brothers and sisters by DNA, pretty much. Spiritually, no. By birth, yes. We all come from Adam and Kava, or Adam and Eve. Verse 11 says, for this is the message that ye have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another, not as Cain, who was of the wicked one. and killed his brother. And killed he him because his own works were evil and his brother's righteous. And that's that jealousy, that's that racism, that's that discord. That's why wicked people do not like righteous people, because their own works were, it shows that their own works are evil. And so now when we go back to Genesis chapter 3 verses 14, when it says, and I will put racism between your progeny and her progeny, now we know that Cain is that progeny of Satan. So scroll back up, we have Cain is that, again, the progeny of Satan. The scriptures clearly say who was of the wicked one. He is hateful, the child of Diablos. Again, a child of Diablos. He's an evildoer, wicked, unjust, and this all goes back to his imagination and consciousness. That is that racism that separate people. So now the next thing I want to do is go over a few verses in the Bible. Again, just talking about that evil imagination and consciousness. In one of the previous lessons, I let you know that imagination is used in the Old Testament, but when you get to the New Testament, it used that word consciousness. So this is Genesis chapter 6 verses 5, and Elohim saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination, everybody, almost everybody at this point was choosing to do wrong. It says, and then it says, the imagination of the thoughts of his heart. This means of his mind was only evil continually. Everybody, by Genesis chapter 6 verse 5, be children of the wicked one, choosing to do wrong instead of right. Jeremiah chapter 7 verse 24 says, but they hearkened not, nor inclined their ears, but walked in the counsels and in the imaginations of their evil heart, and went backwards and not forward. People who are not born again and do not keep the commandments of God, although in their eyes they are seeming to progress, become more wealthier, the scriptures teach they are not. They are going backwards and not forwards. If you do not obey God, if you do not have a good conscience, if you do not have a good imagination, you are not going forward. You are going backwards. You are going towards hate and not love. Jeremiah 11 and 8. Yet they obey not, nor incline their ears. Again, they do not keep the commandments of God, but walked every one in the imagination of their evil heart. Therefore I will bring upon them all the words of this covenant, which I command them to do, but they did them not. They did not keep the commandments of Elohim. Disobedient, children of Diablos. Jeremiah 13:10. This evil people which refuse to hear my words, which walk in the imaginations of their heart, and walk after other gods to serve them and worship them, shall even be as this girdle, which is good for nothing. Jeremiah 16:12. And ye have done worse than your fathers, for behold, ye walk every man after the imagination of his evil heart, that they may not hearken unto me. Jeremiah 18:12. And they said, there is no hope, but we will walk after our own devices, and we will everyone do the imagination of his evil heart. Jeremiah 23:17. They say still. They say still unto them that despise me. Jehovah hath said, ye shall have peace. And they say unto everyone that walketh after their own imagination of his own heart, no evil shall come upon you. And basically what this is talking about is false preachers, false prophets telling the children of Diablos, these people who have a wicked imagination, they have a wicked consciousness. They're lying to them, telling them no evil shall come upon you. because of these wicked imaginations, because of those wicked consonants, and this is a lie. Ye shall not have peace if you're walking after your own imaginations. From here, we go into New Testament scripture, and again in the New Testament, they use the word consciousness to refer to that mind's eye instead of imagination. So when you get to 1 Timothy 1:19, it says, holding faith in a good conscience, which some, having put away, so you can put away that good conscience, concerning faith, have made shipwreck. When you choose to give in to an evil conscience and a bad imagination, you shipwreck. Evil shall come upon you. When you go to 1 Timothy 4:2, it says, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their consciousness seared with a hot iron. That means it's burned up. It doesn't work. Kind of like when you see a doctor performing surgery, they use a hot iron to cut your flesh with precision. That's kind of like the same thing. Their conscience is seared with a hot iron. It is burnt through. It's just no good anymore. And again, those speaking lies and hypocrisy, that's taking the word of God and using it for evil instead of good, turning the truth into a lie. When you get to Titus 1:15, it says, unto the pure all things are pure, but unto them that are defiled and unbelieving is nothing pure, but even their mind, that's that mind's eye, their eyes, and or their imagination and consciousness is defiled, seared with a hot iron. Which some have put away concerning the faith, a good consciousness. They put it away, seared it with a hot iron, it's defiled. Hebrews 9:14. And I'm just going to go straight to this highlighted part because that's why I use this particular verse. It says, purge your consciousness. You can purge your consciousness. You can fix your imagination. You can fix that voice. It says from dead works to serve the living God. So instead of having that evil conscience that do not keep God's commandments, purge out that bad consciousness. Choose to do right. Obey God. And that is how you purge it, by getting in your Bibles, by reading, study, and seeking the truth. When you go to Hebrews 10:22, it says, let us draw near with a true heart, in full assurance of faith, having our hearts, this heart is talking about your brains, your mind, your consciousness, your imagination, sprinkled from evil. That means washed from evil, cleansed from evil, evil consciousness, and our bodies washed with pure water. And then we have 1 Timothy 1:5. It says, now the end of the commandment is charity, loving one another out of a pure heart and of a good consciousness and of faith unformed. So again, there's a lot of scriptures in the Bible that let you know that the ultimate commandment that all the commandments point to or guide you to is charity, loving your fellow man. And again, this is the difference between the children of God and the children of the devil. This is the difference between Cain and Abel. One was evil, one was good. One had an evil imagination and an evil consciousness. The other one had a good imagination and a good consciousness. One obeyed God, the other one didn't obey God. One is hateful, one is loving. If you do not love, you are not a child of God. When you go to Genesis chapter 4, verses 1-7, we want to get a little bit now into my translation. We just kind of went through a review, and now we get into my translation of these particular verses. It says, and Adam sexed Kava, his wife, and she got pregnant and birthed Kwan, and said, I have birthed a male from Jehovah. And she again births his brother Hebel. And again, Quan and Hebel is just their names, the pronunciation of their names in Hebrew. Now, this again goes back to astrology. When you look at those 12 major constellations, or the 12 main ages that the earth passes through, it is written in the heavens that this will happen, that twins will come about in this age. This is the eighth age of the um, Mazarah, or the zodiac calendar. So this is about 16,000 years after creation. This represents the beginning of creation, the age of this goat, but the age of Aquarius, a man pouring out water from a pail. This represents pretty much the end of the ages. So again, this correlates to astrology. And again, when you go to Amos chapter 9, verses 6, it says, "It is he that established his stories in the heavens." This is biblical. Twins represents Cain and Abel, the children of God and the children of the devil. It represents that fall into sin. It represents the knowledge of good and evil, scientific knowledge. And with Amos chapter 9, verses 6, we go over this continually on this YouTube channel, beginning with the first day when he created the galaxy. When you get to the first day light, this is the Hebrew word for light. You pronounce it or. In the ancient Hebrew, it means God's crucified son. This is why Christ says, "I am the light of the world." Everything in the stars even points to Christ. Then we have the earth's age, when we did a review before we went into Genesis chapter 3, the serpent's story, and Kava's curse, and the age of Gemini. That is what they call these age of twins. Scientifically today, it's called the age of Gemini. I call it the age of good and evil. Two manner of nations that proceeded from Adam and Kava. Now from here we're going to go to Genesis chapter 25, verses 21 through 23. And this is just to help you understand a little more that was taking place in the book of Genesis with Cain and Abel. It says, "And Yaskak entreated Jehovah for his wife because she was barren." She couldn't have children. "And Jehovah was entreated of him, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived." She got pregnant, and the children struggled together within her. This is pretty much the same thing that happened to Eve in the beginning. She had two twins, and they struggled in her. That goes back to Genesis chapter 3, verses 16, when it says, "Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your birth pains. This curse is passed down through the generations. And your pregnancy and pain ye shall give birth to children," more than one. It says, "And she said, If it be so, why am I in agony," or in pain? "And she went to inquire of Jehovah. And Jehovah said unto her, Two nations are in your womb." Same thing with Cain and Abel. Two nations are in her womb. "And two manner of people shall be separated from your uterus." Two manner of people was separated from Eve's uterus after the fall. "And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the oldest shall serve the younger." So as you will notice this pattern throughout the whole Bible, the oldest shall serve the younger. So in other words, if Cain didn't kill Abel, Cain would have eventually, in other words, served Abel. Now, another thing that this is just in reference to, while the oldest shall serve the younger, because it represents the first Adam and the second Adam, which is Jesus Christ. When you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 47 through 49, it says, "And so it is written, The first man, Adam, was made a living organism or flesh, a nephesh. The last Adam, which is Jesus Christ, was made a quickening spirit. He was resurrected and given eternal life. So that oldest, the first Adam is the oldest, shall serve the younger. The second Adam, Jesus Christ. Verse 47 said, the first man is of the earth, earthy, and the second man is of the Lord from heaven. As is the earthy, such are they also that are earthy. And as is the heavenly, such are they that are heavenly. And as we have borne the image of the earthly, we shall also bear the image of the heavenly. So again, this kind of goes back to the oldest shall serve the younger, that all of our earthly bodies, the people who obey God, keep his commandment, keep a clean imagination, pure consciousness, again, keep the commandments of Elohim, keep the commandments of God, love their fellow man, is going to put on a new heavenly body that lives forever. So this flesh we have now is going to come subject or to that quickening spirit. Verse 2 says, and we back in Genesis, and she again births his brother Hebel, and Hebel was a herder of sheep, and Quan was a gardener of the ground. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Quan brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto Jehovah. And Hebel, he also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of the fat thereof. In other words, he brought the firstborn and he sacrificed it to Elohim. So this is the second time we read about sacrifice in the Bible. The first sacrifice we go over in coats of skin, when Elohim sacrifices a bull to clothe Adam and Eve. So now we're going to just get into a little bit of why Hebel's offering was accepted, but Quan's wasn't. No, the first thing I want to go over, I'm sorry, in the King James Version Bible, it uses the word firstlings here. I just use the word firstborn. So if you was to go to Genesis chapter 4, again on that Blue Letter Bible website, and look up this particular verse, it says, and Hebel, he brought of the firstlings. I just use the word firstborn. As you can see, firstlings come from the Hebrew reference number 1062. And basically what I have here is when you go down to Numbers chapter 18, verse 15. As you can see here, they still have these words, firstborn and firstlings. This comes from the Hebrew reference number 1060, but they use firstborn. It just means the same thing as firstling. We don't use terms like firstling today, so I just use the word firstborn. Let's see, in everything, we're going to read through this verse 2. When you go to Numbers chapter 18, verse 15, it says, everything that openeth the matrix in all flesh, which they bring unto Jehovah, whether it be man or beast, shall be thine. Nevertheless, the firstborn of man shalt thou redeem, and the firstlings, or the firstborn of unclean beasts, shalt thou redeem. It says, sanctify unto me all the firstborn, whosoever openeth the womb among the children of Israel, both of man and beast, it is mine. So this is why Abel or Hebel offering was accepted. Hebel is the Hebrew pronunciation. Abel is the Greek pronunciation transliterated into English. Exodus 22:9 says, you shall not delay to offer the first of thy ripe fruit, and thy liquors, the firstborn of thy sons shalt thou give unto me. So the reason, when you scroll back up, that Hebrew offering was accepted, but Quan's wasn't, because it just read Quan was a gardener of the ground, and in the process of time, it came to pass that Quan brought of the fruit of the ground. He did not bring that first. It has nothing to do with just the fruit versus the animal sacrifice. God accepts the fruit of the land also as an offering. But what Cain did not do is Cain delayed to offer the first of his ripe fruit. Abel brought the firstborn, the firstlings of his flock. So that is why Abel's sacrifice was accepted, but Cain's was not. When you go to Nehemiah 10 and 36, it says, also the firstborn of your sons and of our cattle, as it is written in the law, and the firstlings of our herds and of our flocks to bring unto the house of Elohim, unto the priests that minister in the house of our Elohim. And then Numbers 10 and 37, and that we should bring the first fruits of our dough. So you can't just bring any fruit or any animal, you have to bring the first. And again, the reason he wants the first, because it is symbolic for the first have to die. In Adam all die, so in Christ shall all be made alive. So he wants the first to be sacrificed, because this first body has to be destroyed. It says, and the offerings and the fruit and all matter. So again, when you get to Numbers chapter 10, 37, it's just confirmed that in Nehemiah, Abel brought the first of his herds, the cattle, as it was written in the law, the herds, the flocks. When you get to Nehemiah 10 and 37, it lets you know that you have to bring the first fruits also, and of thy offerings of the fruit of all manner of trees, of wine and of oil, unto the priests to the chambers. And again, this just lets you know that both offerings, whether it be an animal or fruit, they are acceptable. But what's not acceptable is not bringing God the first. And it says, and Jehovah have respect unto Hebel and to his offering, but unto Quan and his offering he had no respect. When you jump to New Testament, give you a little bit more information. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 4, it says, by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous. Abel obeyed God. God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet spake. Now we'll get into a little bit more of he being dead yet spake, what that means, when we get into the lesson when Cain murders Abel. It says, and Quan was very angry, and his facial expression failed. And Jehovah said unto Quan, why are you angry? And why is your facial expression fallen? If you do good, should not it be lifted? And lifted is talking about his facial expression. And if you do not good, sin lie at the door, craving dominion. Now you go back to Genesis chapter 4, verses 7 in the Oxford edition of 1769. It says, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. As you can see, each of these Hebrew reference number is really one word in the Hebrew. So when you say, and unto thee shall be his desire, all this, and unto he shall be his, is all filler. The only one word there is desire. So it's the same thing when it says, and thou shalt rule. It's In other words, desire and rule. All this other stuff is filler. Even if you translate this from the Masoretic text, there is an extra word in there, but at the end of that translation, it still means this: sin lie at the door, craving dominion over you. And then just to give you another verse so you can understand my translation a little better and to confirm it with scripture, when you go to Romans chapter 6 verses 12 to 14, it says, let not sin therefore reign in your mortal bodies, that ye should obey it in the lust thereof. Neither yield your members as instruments of unrighteousness. This is talking about anything you do, your body parts, your imaginations, your actions, whatever you do not yield your members as unrighteous, as instruments of unrighteousness unto sin. Don't commit sin, but yield yourselves unto God as those that are alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness unto God. For sin shall not have dominion over you. So some people, sin has dominion over them. And this is what pretty much Elohim was warning Quan in the beginning. He's saying, if you do good, if you keep the commandments of God, if you stay obedient, sin will not have dominion over you. I'm going to read this again. If you do good, shall not ye be lifted up? And if you do not good, if you do not good, if you continue to do wrong, continue to have a bad imagination, continue to not purge your consciousness, it says sin lie at the door already, craving to have dominion. So sin can take dominion over your mind if you do not do what's right. And the last thing I want to talk about, and we'll end this lesson, if you go back to Genesis chapter 4 verses 1, if you look up Cain's name in the Hebrew, that's that Hebrew reference number 7014. And as you can see, I have that Hebrew reference number pulled up for you. That's that Hebrew name, and you pronounce it Quan. That's just the Hebrew pronunciation. Now, another thing that I just have here, as you can see, this is the exact same word in the Hebrew. This one is a noun because it is basically a name of a person. This one is an object, and this could possibly mean what Quan names mean, what Quan name mean in the Hebrew. When you, again, this Quan comes from Hebrew reference number 713. This Quan comes from Hebrew reference number 7014. And when you look this word Quan up, it says, and Ishbenabo, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, which was the sons of the giant, the weight of his spear weighed 300 shekels of brass weight. So this probably not correctly translated as a spear. When it's saying a spear can mean anything: a knife, a sword, some type of dagger. And it's saying he had this is a weapon to stab someone with. So this is possibly how Quan killed Abel. He most likely invented a weapon and stabbed Abel. So that's the last thing I wanted to point out in this lesson. So with that being said, this concludes this gospel.